Here's a wild stat. Studies show that more than 65% of people report being confused about their own personality type at some point in their lives. And when you look at the 4 paradoxes Carl Jung mapped out, it's no surprise. Jung said we live in tension between opposites. Logic versus feeling, intuition versus sensation, introversion versus extroversion, order versus chaos. These aren't flaws. They're paradoxes built into the human psyche. And if you've ever wondered why you feel pulled in 2 directions at once, this video is going to make those contradictions finally make sense. We're breaking down Jung's 4 paradoxes in a way you've never heard before. You'll not only understand what they are, you'll actually see yourself in them, because instead of burying you in theory, I've created 4 characters. Quick check. Have you ever felt torn between being logical one day and deeply emotional the next? If yes, you're already living one of Jung's paradoxes. These characters aren't gimmicks, they're memory hooks, ways to see your own traits more clearly and to finally understand why your contradictions aren't mistakes. They're the fuel that makes your type powerful. We'll start with Jung's paradoxes and why they matter for your everyday life. Then I'll introduce you to 4 characters that make these paradoxes unforgettable. The INFJ as future juggler, balancing empathy and planning. The INFP as flowing personality, going with the flow. The INTP as techie prodigy, the systems thinker. And the INTJ as task juggler, handling responsibilities with structure. You're going to meet each one, see their quirks, and then take a quick assessment moment where you figure out which paradox you live in the most. By the end of this video, you'll know your dominant archetype and exactly how to use it as a strength instead of a struggle. Stick around until the end, because one of these paradoxes hides a shadow effect Jung called enantiodromia. It's when your strength flips inside out under pressure, and it's the one thing almost nobody talks about. So if you've ever wondered why your best trait sometimes becomes your biggest weakness, you'll want to hear this part. All right, let's dive in. First, I'll walk you through Jung's 4 paradoxes so you see the psychology, and then you'll meet my 4 characters. Future juggler, flowing personality, techie prodigy, and task juggler. Think of them as mirrors and memory tools. You might laugh, you might nod, but either way, you'll see yourself in one of them. Paradox 1. Thinking versus feeling, INFJ. Thinking organizes the world through logic and order. Feeling organizes the world through values and harmony. Lean too hard into logic and you repress empathy. Lean too hard into empathy and you repress clarity. The paradox isn't a mistake, it's what keeps us balanced. For INFJs, this paradox plays out constantly. Your natural instinct is to prioritize harmony, people, and meaning. But push that too far and you lose boundaries. You end up saying yes when you should say no. On the other hand, when you swing into pure logic, you risk coming across detached or cold. INFJs live in that constant dance, caring deeply while secretly craving clarity. Paradox 2. Intuition versus sensation, INFP. Sensation locks onto the present, what's real and concrete. Intuition sees patterns and what could be. If you live only in sensory detail, you miss the big picture. But if you live only in possibilities, you lose touch with reality. Both matter, and both will fight for space. For INFPs, this paradox shows up as a tug of war between imagination and daily structure. You can lose hours in creativity, vision, or personal meaning. But that often clashes with the reality of bills, routines, and deadlines. When balanced, this paradox makes you visionary and grounded. But left unchecked, you either drift endlessly in possibility or feel trapped in routines you resent. And if this is already clicking for you, hit subscribe right now. Because next we're introducing the 4 characters that bring these paradoxes to life. One of them is going to feel way too familiar, maybe even uncomfortably accurate. Paradox 3, introversion versus extroversion, INTP. Introversion turns inward to thoughts and imagination. Extroversion turns outward to people and action. Jung said, whichever attitude dominates your conscious life, the opposite will build in your unconscious and eventually break through. That's why even the most introverted people crave bursts of social energy, and the most extroverted people sometimes retreat into solitude. For INTPs, this paradox is especially strong. You thrive in your inner world, taking things apart, analyzing, exploring systems. But then suddenly you need external stimulation, debate, or chaos to recharge your brain. And if you overindulge in either, you burn out. Too much introversion leaves you restless and lonely. Too much extroversion leaves you drained and irritable. The balance is delicate, all same, but when you hit it, your insights are unmatched. Paradox 4, enantiodromia, shadow pushback. INTJ. Enantiodromia is Jung's law of opposites. If one tendency dominates too long, the psyche builds up its opposite until it bursts out. That's why a hyper-organized person can suddenly swing into chaos, or a free-flowing spirit can suddenly become rigid and controlling. It's not random. It's balance being restored. For INTJs, this paradox hits hardest. You live for structure, strategy, and efficiency. But if you push that strength too far, the shadow crashes in. Suddenly, you can snap into impulsive decisions, messy behavior, or outright rebellion against your own rules. It feels like you betrayed yourself. But in Jung's view, it's just the psyche forcing balance. For INTJs, the challenge is learning to let go before the shadow takes over. When people talk about personality types today, most of the time they're thinking of the MBTI. Those four-letter codes like INFJ, INFP, INTJ. But here's what most people don't realize. Carl Jung never actually created those 16 types. Back in the 1920s, Jung laid the foundation with what he called psychological types. He outlined the core paradoxes of the human psyche, tensions between opposites like introversion versus extroversion, sensing versus intuition, and thinking versus feeling. These weren't boxes to put people in, but living paradoxes every person has to navigate. Fast forward to the 1940s, and two women, Isabel Briggs Myers and her mother Catherine Cook Briggs, built on Jung's work. They added the judging versus perceiving axis, and from there formalized the system we know today as the Myers-Briggs type indicator. That's how we arrived at the 16 personality types: INFJ, INFP, INTP, INTJ, and so on. So the bottom line is this: Jung didn't create the 16 types himself, but his paradoxes, especially introversion, extroversion, sensing, intuition, and thinking, feeling, were the soil everything grew out of. MBTI is essentially Jung's paradoxes, expanded into a four-letter code that we can recognize, measure, and apply today. So now you know Jung's four paradoxes, but theory only sticks if you can see it in real life. That's why I've created four characters. Think of them as memory hooks: future juggler, flowing personality, techie prodigy, and task juggler. As I introduce each one, pay attention to what feels uncomfortably familiar. By the end, you'll need to comment which archetype you are. Ready? Let's start with the first. Meet the future juggler, FJ. Empathy with a deadline.
Core paradox is thinking versus feeling, logic and plans versus people and harmony, how it feels from the inside. You can sense what everyone needs and you build a plan to meet it. You track birthdays, deadlines, moods, and micro promises. In your head, you feel responsible for the room's well-being. If someone's upset, you can't focus, and saying no feels like letting someone down even when your calendar is already full. Every day tells. You live with color-coded calendars and sticky notes. You'll say things like, "I've got a system." You're the one who asks, "How are you really?" and then tries to fix it and fit it in. You're the glue of group projects, signing tasks, checking in, smoothing tension, and you remember tiny details about people and bring them up thoughtfully under stress. The flip side, you feel resentment from too many yeses, silent frustration that others don't carry their weight, decision fatigue, quiet, fuming, and sometimes you close the door just to protect your own energy. And more often than not, your self-care slips because you've put everyone else first. Strength levers pre-decide your capacity. For example, 2 personal favors per week. Script. Loving knows plan people care, like projects, timelines, owners, realistic scope, and you block a recurring solo time that is non-negotiable.
So, if this sounds familiar, the planner who carries everyone's feelings and deadlines at once, ask yourself, do I track people and projects with equal intensity? Do I often solve feelings with logistics? Do I feel like both the peacemaker and the planner? If that sounds like you might just be a future juggler. Now, if you're listening to that and thinking, that's not me, I don't plan everything, I just go where the vibe takes me, then the next archetype will probably hit home. Meet the flowing personality, FP, feel first, plan never.
Core paradox is intuition versus sensation, possibilities and vibe versus structure and routine, how it feels from the inside. You move by mood and meaning. When inspiration hits your unstoppable, rigid plans feel like cages. You need creative air. You start many soulful projects. A few become masterpieces, others become compost for the next idea. And you track time by feeling when it feels right or after coffee, I'd say. Not by strict clocks every day tells. Your desk or studio looks like a mess, but it makes sense to you. You always have multiple tabs open, multiple hobbies in motion. You chase symbolism, music, imagery, and conversations that feel alive. And you're magnetic when you're passionate, but flat when you're forced under stress. The flip side, overwhelm, leads to avoidance. Shame about inconsistency, distractibility, difficulty finishing things on command, and a deep resentment toward micromanagement strength levers. Build gentle containers like 50-minute focus sprints, a 3-item daily list or theme days. Protect a daily flow window. No pings, no people, just you and the muse and pair with a finisher, or use handoff deadlines to close loops. If this feels like your rhythm, living by vibe and chasing meaning wherever it flows.
Check in with yourself. Does inspiration dictate when I start, and is that when my best work happens? Do schedules only help if they stay flexible? Do I care more about creating something meaningful than ticking every box? If that feels like you're probably a flowing personality. Of course, not everyone is led by feelings and inspiration. Some people live to pick things apart, debug the system, and solve puzzles no one else even sees. If that's you, then Techie Prodigy might feel a little too close for comfort. Pause for a second. Do you see yourself yet? If not, don't click away. The next 2 characters are where most people suddenly say, that's me. So let's keep going. Meet the Techie Prodigy, TP. Always debugging reality.
Core paradox is introversion versus extroversion, deep inner analysis versus bursts of outward exploration, how it feels from the inside your brain, disassemble systems for fun, code, arguments, workflows, worldviews. You love clean logic and elegant models. Ambiguity, it's an irresistible puzzle. You ask precision questions others haven't even considered, but decisions stall. If variables remain unknown, you prefer optionality. Every day tells your tools. Our whiteboards, decision trees, and phrases like, wait, what's the premise? You refactor plans mid-conversation. You rename folders twice a week. You socialize in short, intense bursts, then vanish to recharge and think under stress. The flip side, you get analysis paralysis, rabbit holes, difficulty shipping. Your detached tone can read as cold, and you get frustrated with rules that seem illogical. Strength levers, time. Box your thinking and commit good enough to test beats perfect, in theory. Use evidence checkpoints, EEM. Ask yourself, what would change my mind and ship in version 0.1 today, iterate tomorrow.
If this sounds like your mind, like breaking things down, refining systems, swinging between deep dives and sudden bursts of connection, ask yourself, do I improve things by taking them apart? Do I prefer being accurate over being fast, unless I'm on a timer? Do I swing between social sprints and disappearing to recharge? If that feels familiar, you're probably a techie prodigy. And finally, what if you thrive on structure? What if nothing feels better than checking boxes, crossing things off, and keeping everything on track? If that sounds like you, or if you secretly envy people like that, then you'll definitely recognize Task Juggler. Meet the Task Juggler, TJ. Efficiency is my love language.
Core paradox is in Roya, or the shadow pushback. Excess order eventually triggers chaos to break in how it feels from the inside. You think in milestones, constraints, and outcomes. Ambiguity drains you. Clarity energizes you. You're comfortable leading, prioritizing, and calling the shot, and you trust systems. Until people ignore them every day tells checklists, dashboards, deadlines, and block time on calendars, yours and sometimes others. You ask, what's the deliverable, and who owns this by? When you feel physical relief, when you cross things off under stress, wait, the flip side over control turns into rigidity. And then you snap. Suddenly you're impulsive, messy, or avoidant. You get impatient, terse, and fall into I'll do it myself mode way, which always leads to burnout. Strength levers. Build slack into your schedules, buffers, and plan B paths. Delegate for real. Set clear ownership. Trust the person and check in and give yourself one unstructured block each week to keep the shadow from crashing the party.
And if this feels like home, thriving on structure, loving clarity, but snapping when things slip, then consider, do I relax when a plan exists? Do I get prickly when timelines slip, then overcorrect? Do my best days end with things done, not just discussed? If you're nodding along, you might be a task juggler, so there you have it. Future juggler, flowing personality, techie prodigy, and task juggler. 4 characters, 4 paradoxes, and 1 question. Which one are you? Pick the one you felt in your body. And if you're torn, name a primary and a backup. Drop your answer in the comments. I want to see which paradox archetype this community resonates with the most. And don't stop here. If this video spoke to you, check out the rest of the INFJ series on this channel. Watch next, INFJs and emotional burnout, or the hidden struggles of INFJs at work. Keep binging, because every video peels back another layer of how we think, feel, and live.